The Battle of Baghdad, also known as the Fall of Baghdad, was a military invasion of Baghdad that took place in early April 2003, as a part of the invasion of Iraq. 3 weeks into the invasion of Iraq, coalition forces land component command elements, led by the U.S. Army 3rd Infantry Division, moved into Baghdad. The United States declared victory on April 14, and President George W. Bush gave his mission accomplished speech on May 1. Baghdad suffered serious damage to its civilian infrastructure, economy, and cultural inheritance from the fighting, as well as looting and arson. During the invasion, the Al Yarmouk Hospital in South Baghdad saw a steady rate of about 100 new patients an hour. Several thousand Iraqi soldiers were killed in the battle, and a very small number of coalition forces. After the fall of Baghdad, coalition forces entered the city of Kirkuk on April 10 and Tikrit on April 15, 2003. Preparation. Limited bombing began on March 19, 2003 as United States forces unsuccessfully attempted to kill Saddam Hussein. Attacks continued against a small number of targets until March 21, 2003, when, at 1700 UTC, the main bombing campaign of the U.S. and their allies began. Its forces launched approximately 1,700 air sorties. The invasion of the city commenced 3 days after Allied forces led by Major General Buford Blunt and the 3rd Infantry Division had secured the Baghdad airport. U.S. officials said that their forces fought skirmishes there with Iraq's Special Republican Guard, with 2 task forces going up to the Tigris River from the southern outskirts of the city, before moving west towards the airport. Major General Victor Inuit said the intention was to indicate to the Iraqi leader in that coalition forces could move in and out of Baghdad whenever they wished. The Guardian reported that U.S. forces occupied 2 presidential palaces. The army also surrounded the Information Ministry and other key government installations for a while. On March 24, retired U.S. Army General Barry McCaffrey told BBC Newsnight, "If the Iraqis actually fight, clearly it's going to be brutal, dangerous work, and we could take, bluntly, a couple to 3,000 casualties." Forces. The invasion of Baghdad was led by the United States Army's 3rd Infantry Division and the United States Marine Corps' 1st Marine Division, equipped with M1 Abrams tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles and M113 armored personnel carriers. These forces, along with American and British aircraft, including B-52s, Harrier GR-7 attack jets and A-10 Warthogs, went against the Iraqi Special Republican Guard, a 36,000 soldiers protected in sprawling bunkers 30 miles outside Baghdad, using Assad Babel tanks and heavy artillery. Aerial bombing. At the time of invasion, Allied aircraft were making bombing runs on Baghdad at the rate of 1,000 sorties a day, most of them aimed at the Republican Guard and Special Republican Guard. U.S. planes also dropped about 200,000 leaflets warning civilians to stay in their homes. Royal Air Force Tornadoes from 9 and 617 squadrons attacked the radar defense systems protecting Baghdad, but lost a tornado on the 22nd of March along with the pilot and navigator, shot down by an American Patriot missile as they returned to their airbase in Kuwait. On the 2nd of April, a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter and a United States Navy F/A-18C Hornet were shot down near Karbala. On the 8th of April, an A-10 Warthog attack plane was shot down in the fighting around Jumhuriyah Bridge by an Iraqi surface-to-air missile at Tuwaiha. On April 4, 2003, the 2nd Tank Battalion Marine Corps had a stiff fight with the Al-Nida division of the Republican Guards and foreign Islamist fighters on the outskirts of Baghdad. By the end of the day, the Al-Nida was considered rendered combat ineffective, but 3 U.S. Marines were killed in the at Tuwaiha fighting and a tank lost. That day, The 5th Regimental Combat Team reported that 2 supporting Abrams tanks were destroyed battling the Fedayeen and Al-Nida Republican Guards, the latter attempting to use anti-aircraft guns in the ground role. Baghdad International Airport. On the morning of April 3, 2003, U.S. forces advanced on Saddam International Airport. This location turned out to be the best defended Iraqi position of the entire war, and 2 U.S. soldiers were killed by mortar fire early in the fighting. After several hours of combat, the 1st Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division succeed in taking control of the airport, which will become the hub of American logistics in Iraq for the next 7 years. Before sunrise on April 4, the Americans were subjected to a fierce counter-attack by Iraqi troops. The 1st Brigade's Tactical Operations Center began receiving small arms and mortar fire. Under the cover of darkness, a number of T-72 tanks managed to get within several hundred meters of their position. According to one source, it was not until a chemical reconnaissance vehicle was fired on, and a Bradley actually was hit by a T-72 main gun round, that the battalion became aware of its peril. Fortunately for the crew, the hit was only a glancing one, and they were able to drive their vehicle out of harm's way. A fire team with a Javelin ATGM destroyed 2 of the Iraqi tanks, while the rest were destroyed by a passing M1 Abrams. As dawn approached, the attack on the TOC intensified, and Iraqi infantry flooded into the position on foot. During the fighting, Sergeant First Class Paul Ray Smith's actions resulted in the posthumous awarding of Division's first Medal of Honor since World War II. During the softening up bombardment of Baghdad Airport on 3 April 2003, an Air Force F-15E fighter mistakenly attacked Battery C, 1st Battalion, 313th Field Artillery, destroying 2 Humvees and killing Sergeant First Class Randy Wren and Sergeants Donald Oakes and Todd Robbins. 5 other soldiers from the unit were injured in the air attack. Sergeant First Class Wilbert Davis is also reported to have been killed along with U.S. journalist Michael Kelly on 3 April after coming under fire during operations to secure Baghdad Airport. Thunder runs. On April 5, Task Force 1-64 Armor of the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division, 2nd Brigade, executed a raid, later called the Thunder Run, to test remaining Iraqi defenses. The operation began south of Baghdad and went through main roads to the newly secured airport. Iraqi resistance was disorganized, and the unit sustained few casualties. The unit was forced to abandon 1 tank due to a recoilless rifle or RPG strike in the rear that penetrated a fuel cell and set the engine on fire. The crew was unharmed. Later, the Air Force bombed the tank to destroy it in place, and the Iraqi Information Ministry claimed credit for destroying it. This route had been fortified in the intervening period, and senior leaders feared much more substantial resistance than during the prior encounter. Colonel David Perkins, the brigade's commander, followed the original Thunder Run route north into Baghdad, but then veered east into the government districts instead of west towards the airport. The 2nd Brigade easily took control of what is now the Green Zone in 1 day, dramatically speeding up the end of conventional ground combat in Iraq. This portion of the battle was described in detail in the book Thunder Run, The Armored Strike to Capture Baghdad by David Zucchino, published March 22, 2004. Objectives Mo, Larry, and Curly. On April 7, 2003, intense fighting took place at 3 locations known as Objectives Mo, Larry, and Curly. Each objective was a cloverleaf where east-west roads intersected, with the main north-south route being used for the Thunder Run. Successfully holding these highway interchanges was essential to keep Highway 8 open, thus allowing U.S. forces to remain in the city center following the 2nd Thunder Run. Objective Mo was at the junction of Highway 8 and the Qadisiyah Expressway, Larry at Qatar al-Nada Street leading to the Al-Jadriya Bridge. in Curlie at the Dora Expressway. At the southernmost location, Objective Curlie, an 18-hour battle by the 3 to 15 infantry resulted in the deaths of 2 U.S. soldiers killed by RPG rounds and about 40 wounded, with 350 to 500 Iraqi casualties. U.S. tank and infantry units nearly ran out of fuel and ammunition and were almost overrun until reinforcements broke through and were able to resupply Objective Curlie. Toward the end of the fighting, an Iraqi Frog 7 rocket or an ABABIL-100 SSM missile exploded among the parked vehicles of the headquarters of 2nd Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division, killing 2 soldiers, wounding 15 others and destroying 17 military vehicles. The earlier death of journalist David Bloom, who had been embedded with the 3 to 15 infantry, prevented the dramatic fighting from coming to public attention at the time of the battle. The Arthur Palace. On April 7, U.S. troops took control of a major presidential palace along the Tigris River. It had been hoped that leaders of the regime would be found in the complex, located near Saddam Hussein's hometown of Tikrit. American commanders on the ground said that they would remain in the city center rather than return to the outskirts as they had done previously. Within hours of the palace seizure and with television coverage of this spreading through Iraq, U.S. forces ordered Iraqi forces within Baghdad to surrender, or the city would face a full-scale assault. Iraqi government officials had either disappeared or had conceded defeat. Jamhuriya Bridge. On 8 April 2003, some 500 Iraqis mounted a fierce counterattack across the Jamhuriya Bridge, forcing part of the U.S. forces on the western side of Baghdad to initially retreat. But the Iraqis reportedly lost 50 killed in the fighting that included the use of A-10 Warthogs on the part of the U.S. forces. An A-10 attack plane was shot down in combating the counterattack by an Iraqi surface-to-air missile. Looting. As the American forces secured control of the capital, Iraqi civilians immediately began looting the palaces, as well as government offices. At the Yarmouk hospital, not only all beds but all medical equipment was stolen. One other hospital managed to keep on functioning in a manner by organizing local civilians as armed guards. Serious looting was described at National Museum of Iraq, and the Saddam Arts Center, the University of Baghdad, 3 5-star hotels, the Al Rashid, the Al Mansour and Babel Hotel, state-owned supermarkets, many embassies, and state-owned factories. At the National Museum of Iraq, which had been a virtual repository of treasures from the ancient Mesopotamian cultures as well as early Islamic culture, many of the 170,000 irreplaceable artifacts were either stolen or broken. On April 14, the Iraq National Library and National Archives were burned down, destroying thousands of manuscripts from civilizations dating back as far as 7,000 years. Within 8 days following the 2003 invasion, only 35, or 5% of the 700 animals in the Baghdad Zoo survived. This was a result of theft of some animals for human food, and starvation of caged animals that had no food or water. Survivors included larger animals like lions, tigers, and bears. Notwithstanding the chaos brought by the invasion, South African Lawrence Anthony and some of the zookeepers cared for the animals and fed the carnivores with donkeys they had bought locally. Political control. As the U.S. forces were occupying the Republican Palace and other central landmarks and ministries on April 9, Saddam Hussein had emerged from his command bunker beneath the Al-Azamiya district of northern Baghdad, and greeted excited members of the local public. This impromptu walkabout was probably his last, and his reasons for doing so are still unclear. It is possible that he wished to take what he thought might be his last opportunity to greet his people as their country's president. The walkabout was captured on film and broadcast several days after the event on Al Arabiya television, and was also witnessed by ordinary people who corroborated the date afterwards. He was accompanied by bodyguards and other loyal supporters, including at least one of his sons and his personal secretary. After the walkabout, Hussein returned to his bunker and made preparations for his family. On April 9, 2003, Baghdad was formally occupied by coalition forces. Much of Baghdad remained unsecured, however, and fighting continued within the city and its outskirts well into the period of occupation. Saddam, certain members of his family and close subordinates had vanished, and his whereabouts were unknown. Many Iraqis celebrated the downfall of Saddam by vandalizing the many portraits and statues of him together with other pieces of his cultive personality. One widely publicized event was the dramatic toppling of a large statue of Saddam in Baghdad's Fardis Square. This attracted considerable media coverage at the time. Fardis Square statue destruction before a conglomerate of international press. A 20-foot-tall statue of Saddam in Fardis Square was toppled by an U.S. Marine Corps M88 recovery vehicle. Initially, a Marine corporal named Edward Chin of the 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines Regiment placed a United States flag on the statue's head, though it was replaced with an Iraqi flag. Various other symbols of the president's personality cult were defaced. Search for Hussein. The Americans had meanwhile started receiving rumors that Saddam was in Al-Azamiya, and at dawn on April 10, they dispatched 3 companies of U.S. Marines to capture him. The Marines fought a fierce 4-hour battle at a Baghdad mosque where senior Iraqi leaders had been thought to be holed up, as American warplanes attacked areas of the city under the control of Iraqi fighters. We had information that a group of regime leadership was attempting to organize a meeting. The fighting in and around the mosque complex could not be avoided as enemy forces were firing from the area of the mosque, said Navy Captain Frank Thorpe. Marines came under fire from rocket-propelled grenades, mortars and assault rifles. 1 Marine was killed and more than 20 were wounded, but neither Saddam nor any of his aides were found. Reporting. Iraq, which had no free press, initially issued a statement contradicting Western reporters' accounts of the invasion. Mohammed Saeed al-Sahaf, head of the Information Ministry, told a press conference on April 7 that there were no U.S. troops in Baghdad, saying, "Their infidels are committing suicide by the hundreds on the gates of Baghdad. Be assured, Baghdad is safe, protected. Iraqis are heroes." On April 8, 2 American air-to-surface missiles hit Al Jazeera's office in Baghdad and killed a reporter and wounded a cameraman. The nearby office of Arab satellite channel, Abu Dhabi TV, was also hit by airstrikes. Al Jazeera accused the U.S. of attacking Arab media to hide facts. On the same day, a U.S. Army tank fired into the 15th floor of the Palestine Hotel in Baghdad, where almost all foreign journalists resided, and killed 2 cameramen and wounded 3. In the Abu Dhabi case, the station aired the picture of Iraqi fire from beneath the camera. In the hotel case, however, other journalists on the scene denied any fire from or around the hotel.